From the very first moment you heard the name, it was placed in the same category as fairy tales and fantasies, somewhere between unicorns and lost pirate treasures. A story, not the truth. Curiosity, not reality. But what if this story isn't fiction at all? What if Atlantis was real? And more than that, what if it was the missing link in our spiritual evolution? A part of ourselves deliberately hidden, distorted, and buried under centuries of distraction. We are told Atlantis was lost in the ocean. But what if it has been buried in our memory all along, hiding in plain sight, not as a place to be found, but as a consciousness to be remembered? This isn't just about lost cities and sunken temples. It's about a forgotten frequency. And if you are here, it means something within us already knows this. Atlantis. The word itself carries a charge, a spark of something ancient, powerful, and almost familiar. Many have heard the story before. A mighty civilization, rich in knowledge and power, destroyed in a single day and night. This version comes from Plato, the Greek philosopher who lived over 2,000 years ago. Most people dismiss his account as a metaphor, a cautionary tale. But what if it wasn't? What if Plato wasn't inventing Atlantis, but remembering it? In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Plato claimed the story was passed down from Egyptian priests through Solon, one of Athens' wisest lawmakers. They spoke of a continent beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, a land more advanced than any known at the time, which rose in power and fell into corruption. Despite Plato's authority, the scientific community tends to view his account of Atlantis as an allegory, a cautionary fable meant to illustrate deep philosophical concepts. However, a legitimate question arises. Why would such a respected thinker invest so much meticulous detail into a narrative that was supposed to be merely a figment of imagination? Plato didn't limit himself to generalities. He scrupulously described Atlantis, specifying its geographical location, architectural features, social organization, and most importantly, its value system. He presented it as a land founded on divine principles, where spiritual and material well-being were once in harmony. At the same time, the philosopher also recounted Atlantis' decline, a demise caused not by external enemies, but by internal vices. Greed supplanted virtue, and ego triumphed over wisdom. This imbalance between spiritual power and human corruption was the cause of its tragic end. This is not just an entertaining story, it is a warning to posterity. It is worth noting that Plato was not alone in his accounts of ancient, highly developed civilizations that vanished from the face of the earth. Across the globe, echoes of the Atlantis legend can be found, hidden yet accessible to the discerning eye. The Mayans passed down traditions of a lost land called Alan, which they said sank beneath the waves. Ancient Indian texts mention a flourishing civilization called Kumari Kandam, swallowed by the ocean. Indigenous peoples of the Pacific Islands speak of Lemuria, another ancient kingdom lost to time. Even early Egyptian chronicles contain hints of a forgotten era that preceded the rise of dynastic Egypt, a golden age that mysteriously disappeared. These are not random coincidences, but scattered echoes of a universal memory concealed beneath layers of conquest, mistranslation, and ridicule. There is a pattern in how these legends unfold. A once flourishing civilization declines, losing its connection to its spiritual center. These are not mere myths, but fragments of collective memory, skillfully encrypted and passed down orally, as official historical records would never have preserved them. But why hide this knowledge? Atlantis is not just a legendary city. It is a symbol of unrealized human potential, a reflection of what we were capable of in the past and what we can strive for in the future. For those in power, there is no greater threat than people realizing their own strength. The prevailing concept presents time as a linear process, a steady progression forward. But what if this is a deliberate distortion? What if we have been down this path before? Imagine a society that reached the pinnacle of technological advancement, living in spiritual harmony and prosperity beyond anything the modern world can conceive. Yet pride and internal imbalance lead to inevitable catastrophe. It is entirely possible that our modern world, with its ubiquitous screens and complex systems, is merely a pale imitation of Atlantis' former glory. If you have ever felt that something vital is missing, some deep, ancient connection, it's not just your imagination. This feeling of longing is the very thread pulling us towards a truth we have always known subconsciously. This isn't about sentimental nostalgia. It's about awakening memories. Atlantis is not only a narrative of bygone days, but also a mirror reflecting the present. And once you see this connection, it will be impossible to ignore. We have been conditioned to perceive technological progress as something separate, external, wires, mechanisms, soulless metal designed to accelerate the pace of life and provide comfort. However, the technologies of legendary Atlantis were radically different from modern conceptions. They did not serve purposes of domination or entertainment, but were aimed at achieving harmony and balance. Atlantean technology was spiritual in nature. It was not merely a means of utilization, but rather a way of tuning, achieving resonance between the material world and the mind, building a bridge between the physical and the divine. Imagine a society where energy is not extracted from the earth's depths through destruction, but channeled by the power of thought and intention. Temples served not only as places of worship, but also as resonators, amplifying sound, light, and vibrations to achieve soul harmony. Crystals were not mere ornaments but living tools, possessing consciousness, designed to store information, transmit energy, and facilitate healing and evolution. According to esoteric teachings, such as theosophy, the wisdom of Lemuria and Atlantis, and the prophecies of Edgar Cayce, a high spiritual science flourished in Atlantis, uniting consciousness and technology. Atlanteans knew how to channel energy through sound vibrations, sacred geometry, and the unique properties of natural stones. Pyramids, built with incredible precision, served not as tombs, but as powerful power stations. Obelisks were not just monuments, but rather tuning forks. It was believed that crystals, especially clear quartz, and others found in abundance in Atlantis, powered entire cities, not with fossil fuels or electrical wires, but through harmonious resonance and light. This is not fiction, but advanced methods of frequency management that predated modern scientific achievements by millennia. Sound played a crucial role in these technologies. Ancient civilizations understood that the universe is permeated with vibrations and that every entity, a thought, a feeling, a physical body, or a planet, possesses its own frequency. By using specific sound tones, they could transform states of consciousness, heal ailments, and even levitate objects. Ancient Sanskrit texts contain mentions of mantras capable of altering reality. Egyptian temples, in turn, served as resonators for chants that harmonized human energy centers, known as chakras. Tibetan singing bowls still hold echoes of this ancient knowledge. Atlanteans did not invent these truths. merely remembered them. However, over time, as ego and the lust for power took over, this knowledge began to be used for selfish purposes. What was once sacred became defiled. Crystals, once programmed for healing, were now used to control the masses. Sound, which once uplifted the spirit, transformed into a tool of manipulation. Some sources claim that the very technologies intended for consciousness expansion ultimately led to Atlantis' demise. The Atlanteans tried to subjugate energy to their will, instead of living in harmony with the wisdom of the universe. This imbalance, this distortion of sacred technologies, accelerated their fall. This isn't fiction. It's a reality mirrored in the modern era. Today, humanity holds devices that emit waves whose nature we don't fully comprehend. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 5G networks. These invisible vibrations have become an integral part of our daily lives, permeating our homes and bodies. We live in an ocean of frequencies, yet we have lost connection with the truth that once served as their compass. Atlantean technologies, in contrast, were not based on codes or screens. They represented an organic, living system, synchronized with the rhythms of the earth and the cosmos. The reason this knowledge was hidden from us lies in its potential threat to the established dogmas we have been taught to believe. Imagine what would happen if every person realized that their body is a receiver and transmitter of frequencies, that their voice possesses healing power, and that their mind can control energy. How would this change our way of life? Atlanteans were not celestial beings. They were humans who preserved ancient knowledge, and now we are beginning to remember it. This isn't about collecting crystals or attending relaxing sound baths. It's about awakening the potential dormant within each of us. Atlantean technologies were not artificially created. They were embodied. And the further we drift from our inner world, the more we forget that true power lies not in the tools, but in the consciousness that wields them. The demise of Atlantis was not merely a tragic confluence of events caused by natural disasters. Such an explanation, widely propagated by history, is merely a superficial view of what transpired. Undoubtedly, ancient texts contain mentions of earthquakes, floods, and the sudden disappearance of the island into the depths of the sea. However, these catastrophes were merely the final act in a tragedy that had unfolded long before the earth trembled. The true cause of Atlantis' fall lies in the spiritual decay and abuse of power that afflicted the once flourishing civilization. For millennia, Atlantis served as a paradigm of divine harmony, where people lived in accordance with cosmic laws and technologies were based on wisdom. Leaders were chosen not for personal ambition, but for purity of thought, recognizing that government, science, and spirituality should serve the highest good. But over time, cracks appeared in this idyllic picture. Inquisitive minds turned into arrogance, and the pursuit of self-knowledge gave way to a lust for control. The Atlanteans, once humble co-creators with nature, came to see themselves as its masters. The spiritual elite, consisting of priest-kings, scientists, and sages, fractured into two camps. Some continued to follow the path of light, while others succumbed to the temptation of manipulation, ego, and division. This energetic rift, a chasm between higher consciousness and base desires, spread like wildfire. Advanced technologies, created for healing and development, were used for surveillance, weaponry, and consolidating power. The energetic balance that sustained Atlantis began to crumble. the earth responded not out of vengeance, but out of inevitability. When the spiritual foundation collapses, the physical world follows suit. In his prophetic readings, Edgar Cayce mentioned the existence of two opposing philosophical and spiritual currents in Atlantis, the sons of the law of one and the sons of Belial. The former championed the principles of unity, divine harmony, and selfless service to others, while the latter chose materialism, ego, and the use of life force for personal gain. This centuries-long confrontation gradually escalated until it reached a critical point. The demise of Atlantis was not a sudden act of divine retribution, but a natural consequence of the accumulated energetic imbalance that could no longer be sustained. It is here that a disturbing sense of déjà vu arises, for the story of Atlantis is in essence our own. Story. One only needs to look around. The modern era is characterized by incredible power, yet humanity is more disconnected than ever from the spiritual foundation of that power. Having reached the pinnacle of technological progress, people have lost the wisdom necessary to manage these achievements. While manipulating energy, time, and biological processes, society faces a mental health crisis. The connection with nature weakens, and spiritual understanding is either ridiculed or commodified. Does this not sound familiar? Atlantis is not just a legendary city buried in the depths of the ocean. It is rather an allegory of the choice facing humanity in the present. We are balancing on the same precipice, experiencing a similar temptation to use the might of the mind for control instead of selfless service, to build grand structures while ignoring harmony, to strive for dominance instead of creative cooperation. The same division is brewing in society between those who hold the law of unity in memory and those obsessed with the illusory power of omnipotence. This is precisely why the narrative of Atlantis is often perceived as a myth. If we were to take this story with due seriousness, recognizing its profound meaning, it would force us to look in a mirror. We would see that the tragedy of the past can repeat itself, and that right now we are determining which version of history we are destined to experience. The fall of Atlantis was not an act of divine retribution, but a natural consequence. It was the sad outcome of an entire civilization losing connection with the source of its own power. A society that reached unprecedented heights through the awareness of its true nature fell by choosing oblivion. This warning does not belong to the distant past. It is timeless, and it is not about instilling fear, but about the necessity of conscious choice. The annals of the past are often shaped by those who seek to consign inconvenient truths to oblivion. In the context of Atlantis, oblivion appears not as a random coincidence, but as the result of a deliberate strategy. The question arises, is the history of Atlantis buried not just under layers of water, but also under layers of intentional concealment, so that humanity remains in a state of spiritual slumber? For Atlantis poses a threat not only to the accepted chronology of historical events, but also to fundamental notions of human nature and our place in the universe. Traditions claim that after the fall of Atlantis, its surviving inhabitants dispersed across the world, not as pitiful refugees, but as disseminators of sacred knowledge. They carried with them fragments of past glory, sacred sciences, astronomical knowledge, and spiritual practices that once formed the bedrock of a society living in harmony with divine laws. These Atlantean survivors did not vanish without a trace into the abyss of history. They became secret architects, raising new civilizations. They founded esoteric schools in ancient Egypt, encrypted wisdom in the architecture of temples, pyramids, and oral traditions. They did not shout their knowledge from the rooftops, but skillfully hid it in symbols, myths, and structures, accessible only to those who awakened to true understanding. Look at the monumental grandeur of ancient Egyptian architecture, the impeccable precision with which the pyramids were built, the profound symbolism etched in hieroglyphs, the precise alignment of monuments with celestial bodies. Could these achievements truly be the work of primitive civilizations? No. They are more likely echoes from the depths of a forgotten past, remnants of Atlantis, eternally etched in stone. The Sphinx, gazing toward the rising sun on the spring equinox, may be far older than commonly believed. Scholars note that the traces of water erosion on its body do not align with the accepted chronology. Why is this so important? Because if the fundamental timeline is flawed, then the entire historical picture built upon it is called into question. The priests of ancient Egypt possessed esoteric knowledge. Initiates in mystery schools learned to remember the past, not only with their minds, but also with their souls. They comprehended vibrations, colors, geometry, and breath. They did not blindly worship gods, but studied the universal laws governing energy, thought, manifestation, and consciousness, the very laws by which the Atlanteans once lived until they abandoned them. But then a turning point occurred. Powerful empires arose, dogmatic religions formed, and with them came pervasive control. Power began to consolidate, not through the dissemination of knowledge, but through the imposition of blind faith. Ancient libraries were burned, and teachings were distorted beyond recognition. Those who preserved the memory of the past were persecuted, branded as heretics, witches, or madmen. The Roman Empire, the Church, colonial powers, they didn't just conquer lands, they enslaved memory. And what could not be completely destroyed was declared a myth. Atlantis became a beautiful fairy tale, Lemuria, a naive fabrication. The teachings of Hermes were diluted with superstitions and prejudices. Esoteric traditions were either eradicated or driven deep underground. Truth never completely disappeared. It was merely skillfully hidden from the eyes of seekers. It is concealed in the depths of symbols, veiled in language, left in plain sight, but most importantly, it slumbers within each of us. The greatest lie ingrained in human consciousness is not the falsifications in textbooks or the dogmas in temples, but the deeply embedded belief in one's own ordinariness, weakness, and disconnection from an inexhaustible source of power. If people are made to believe in their insignificance, they will never dare to ask the crucial questions, nor will they seek what is hidden within themselves. Instead, they will search for answers in external systems, falling into a trap that has held humanity in ignorance for centuries. However, cracks are appearing in this armor of ignorance. People are awakening. Knowledge they were never taught is surfacing in their memory. An inexplicable attraction to symbols, sounds, and ancient lore overtakes them. They feel an irresistible urge not just to believe in Atlantis' existence, but to remember it. When enough people awaken, the old story will collapse. This is not about merely rewriting historical facts out of idle curiosity, but about reclaiming a lost heritage. Atlantis is not just a chapter from ancient history. It is the missing link in humanity's spiritual identity. The knowledge of Atlantis was hidden, not to protect people from the truth, but to protect the system from their awakening. Not everyone will feel this call, but those who do, those who have always felt like strangers in this world, who sense something deeper beneath life's surface, often carry echoes of ancient times, echoes of ages that preceded this life and this world as we know it. The memory of Atlantis lives not only in books and ruins, it lives in people. And if you found this text, perhaps it lives in you too. Among us live souls marked by an insatiable hunger for something more than the mundane. This is not merely material dissatisfaction, but a deep spiritual longing. Perhaps they tried to follow the conventional path, education, career, pursuing a dream, but even upon achieving their desires, they felt emptiness and alienation, as if living someone else's life. This inner pain, this inexplicable restlessness, it's not a sign of failure, but rather a call from the depths of time. It's a faint yet persistent impulse from their past incarnations, a reminder of experiences lived. Many esoteric teachings speak of the existence of reincarnated Atlanteans, souls who lived during the flourishing and tragic fall of Atlantis. They return to our world to contribute to humanity's spiritual awakening and prevent the repetition of past mistakes. These are not just fascinating theories for esoteric enthusiasts, but important messages for those ready for spiritual growth. The attraction to ancient knowledge, interest in crystals, energy practices, ancient symbolism, and sacred geometry. These are not random trendy fascinations, but echoes of knowledge already embedded in their souls. It is the awakening of genetic memory, a return to the origins when these souls possessed powerful knowledge and abilities. Perhaps the attentive reader has noticed their heightened sensitivity to the surrounding world. They feel others' emotions more acutely than most people. They tend to pick up on the energy of spaces, intuitively discern lies, and feel drained after meaningless conversations. Society often labels this excessive. But what if the truth lies elsewhere? What if this person isn't too much, but possesses a more developed level of awareness than the general populace? This heightened sensitivity is not a flaw, but a distinguishing trait, indicative of a deep memory. Ancient Atlanteans possessed a unique ability to tune into the subtlest vibrations, emotions, and intuitive insights. They are not broken, they are simply remembering. It is quite likely that they have always been drawn to ancient cultures, sacred sites, or symbols, as if highlighted in their consciousness, even if they cannot explain the reason for this pull. These are not random coincidences but echoes of the past, imprinted on their soul. And the more intently they listen to these echoes, the clearer what has been dormant until now becomes. Dreams indistinguishable from memories, skills they never learned but nonetheless possess, truths that resonate powerfully throughout their entire being, even if those around them do not share their understanding. They do not need external validation for their essence, for the knowledge is contained within them, where it has always resided. Reincarnated Atlantean souls do not possess any exceptional advantages over other people. Their purpose is not to create cults or found new religious doctrines. Their role in the modern world is more subtle, yet of immense significance. They serve as healers, truth seekers, disruptors of established orders, individuals with a heightened sense of empathy and an insatiable thirst for knowledge. The presence of these souls on Earth at this time is not a random coincidence. In an era of global shifts in human consciousness, they are gradually, yet surely and harmoniously, awakening to their true mission. Their task is not to recreate Atlantis in its former form, but to restore that very frequency of vibrations, that harmony between the spiritual and material worlds, which was once a defining feature of that ancient civilization. They are called to remind other people that this level of consciousness is not lost forever, but merely temporarily forgotten. To fulfill this mission, no special badges or permissions are required. There is no need to be confident in one's abilities. If even a small part of what has been said resonates within the soul, if these words penetrate deeper than simple understanding, then the truth is already known. Memories awaken, not through rational thought, but through internal resonance. And if one's entire being surges forward, it is not mere curiosity, but recognition. Presence in this world is not accidental. This is not merely discovering a message, but responding to it. The legacy of Atlantis has not remained in the past. It is awakening within. On the path of every seeker of knowledge, a turning point arrives when the focus of their questions undergoes a radical change. The question is no longer whether the legendary Atlantis truly existed. Far more important is the realization that perhaps one is oneself a carrier of this ancient civilization. At first, it manifests subtly, dreams that leave a lingering aftertaste, conversations that evoke a strange sense of recognition, an inexplicable pull towards the stars, ancient texts, frequencies, and knowledge that defy rational explanation, but instantly resonate within the soul. This is not merely a figment of imagination, it is awakening memories. Atlantean consciousness is activated not through the accumulation of knowledge, but through vibrations. In the era of Atlantis, mind and soul were not separated by an impenetrable wall. Intellect and intuition formed a harmonious duet. Thought served as a tool for consciousness, not its limiting cage. Today, awakening Atlantean consciousness means restoring this wholeness and realizing the boundless nature of one's own consciousness. The Atlanteans possessed knowledge that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. The mind is not merely a product of brain activity, but a field, a frequency, a bridge between visible and invisible worlds. This bridge still exists within every person. Every meditation session, when awareness expands beyond the physical body, is a return to this ancient frequency. Every alignment of breath with intention, every use of sound to alter one's state, every choice of silence over busyness, these are reconnections to a way of life that was suppressed, ridiculed, and forgotten, but never completely vanished. It continues to live within human biology, in its energy field, and in its deep-seated knowledge. It's impossible to activate Atlantean consciousness simply by increasing effort. Instead, it's achieved by tuning into its frequency. In silence, a kind of portal opens. Breath becomes the key to understanding, and movement awakens dormant memory. The more diligently one sheds learned limitations, fears, and feelings of disconnection, the more space is cleared for primordial wisdom. What returns is not just information, but a profound resonance. One rediscovers the ability to listen without hearing, to see without using sight, and to feel without needing explanations. The Atlantean state of consciousness was characterized by its breadth and all-encompassing nature. It was focused not on dominating others, but on achieving inner harmony. Each individual was seen as an integral part of a vast energetic network, connecting everyone, including Earth, the stars, and the prime source of life. In this worldview, human experience was not separate from the divine, but was a path to understanding it. Today, awakening the Atlantean mind means consciously choosing to live in accordance with this knowledge. This implies understanding that thoughts form vibrational frequencies, emotions create reality, and beliefs act as tuning forks, determining one's perception of the world. This process is not always easy. As outdated programs dissolve, One might feel a sense of losing their footing. Friends might drift away, interests may change, and one might no longer tolerate the noise they once inhabited. However, this is an integral part of the transformation. It's not destruction, but a breakthrough to a new level of awareness. The path through Atlantis is far from linear. It's like a spiral, winding in an eternal dance. It periodically returns to its starting point, as if testing one's resolve. But each such return, like a step on a ladder, brings one closer to understanding the truth. One comes into this world not to escape it, but to transform it, to illuminate with light those corners where confusion reigns. The task is to embody the frequency of these memories so fully that those around you begin to feel it, even without hearing a single word. This is how Atlantean consciousness spreads, not through force or pressure, but through vibrations, not through instruction or sermons, but through one's very presence. And this process begins with a simple question, whispered through the veil of time. What if I already know? If Atlantis were merely a fiction, a legend, no one would care whether someone believed in it or not. Scientific institutions wouldn't expend resources to disprove it, and scientists wouldn't ridicule it with such ferocity. Entire systems wouldn't have been built to divert attention from this topic. But all of this happens, and it should prompt certain thoughts. The forgetting of Atlantis is not a figment of imagination. It's a manifestation of fear, not the fear of those who seek knowledge, but the fear of those who are afraid of losing control. For the remembrance of Atlantis is not merely a rewriting of ancient history. It's a redefinition of human identity itself. It awakens something that makes an individual unpredictable, free. And free minds, as is well known, are extremely difficult to control. The current era seems deliberately constructed to make humanity forget its true potential. From all sides, distractions attack. One drowns in floods of information, yet feels a sharp lack of wisdom. Barely opening one's eyes in the morning, the mind immediately rushes outwards, drawn by notifications, screaming headlines, and an endless stream of tasks. This is not by chance, but a carefully designed plan. The goal is simple: to keep people busy so they don't ask serious questions, to entertain them so they don't seek truth, to make them consume so they forget their creative mission. This system, however, has not only a material manifestation, but also a deeply psychological impact. From childhood, people are taught to view the world through a narrow prism, shaped by media, education, and various institutions interested in maintaining their forgetfulness. They are instilled to trust only what can be measured, acquired, or rationally explained, while everything else, intuition, energy, ancient knowledge, is declared delusion. If one feels that there is something more to the world than what is shown to them, it doesn't make them crazy. Rather, they've been conditioned to think of themselves as such if they dare to speak about it aloud. But the truth is that knowledge of Atlantis never disappeared. It was merely carefully hidden beneath a thick layer of ridicule and neglect. This is how those in power bury true strength, not by destroying it, but by discrediting it. The reason for this behavior is simple. If enough people remember what Atlantis truly was, the existing system will not be able to stand. For it thrives on division, the division of humanity from nature, the division of people from each other, and the division of humanity from its inner knowledge. Atlantis, on the other hand, was built on principles of unity, harmony, and spiritual sovereignty. This is where the true danger to the existing order lies. What will happen when humanity realizes a simple truth? that no one's permission is needed to comprehend truth. When people remember that their bodies are sacred temples, their intuition is a powerful intelligence, and their thoughts are creative forces capable of manifesting reality. What will happen when they understand that they are not faceless consumers in a vast machine, but co-equal creators in a living, breathing universe? The collapse of the system doesn't occur due to violence and bloodshed, but due to its own inherent inadequacy and obsolescence. As soon as a person reclaims their inner power, they stop handing it over to anyone else. This is why the most important and fateful truths are often hidden from plain sight, disguised as fiction and fantasy. It's much easier to dismiss something than to defend against its awakening impact. For this reason, the story of Atlantis has become a bedtime story, because if people saw in it a reflection of themselves, what they once were, and what they could potentially become again, it would ignite an unquenchable flame within them that cannot be controlled. We live in an era of unprecedented information abundance and astonishing ignorance. We have learned to split atoms, but we have forgotten how to dwell in silence and tranquility. We create machines that think faster than us, but we forget the ability to feel and empathize. And yet, through this deafening noise, the memory of what once was continues to pulsate, quietly but persistently, manifesting in dreams, in synchronistic events, in the unwavering feeling that each of us is destined for something more than mere survival and repeating someone else's idea of success. In our time, when the information field is overflowing with lies and truth suppression, the true act of defiance becomes the awakening of memory. It's not just about recalling forgotten facts, but about returning to those feelings and sensations when truth illuminates consciousness. This is not mere curiosity, but rather the activation of a deep, genetic memory dormant within each of us. The more complete our memory becomes, the weaker the control of those who seek to manipulate us. And this doesn't happen through open struggle, but by us ceasing to fuel their lies with our ignorance. Memories of Atlantis, a legendary civilization, pose a serious threat to the existing system. They remind us of our true nature, that a harmonious combination of spirituality and science, mind and heart, is not merely a utopia, but a reality that once existed. By remembering Atlantis, we gain the opportunity to recreate it anew, but not through the efforts of governments or institutions, but through the awakening of each individual's consciousness. Atlantis should become not just a memory, but a plan, a blueprint for building a new world, a world based on the harmony of inner and outer, a world where civilization is built not on domination, but on cooperation and creation. Although material evidence of Atlantis' existence may be lost, its spiritual pattern, its code, still lives within us. It awaits the moment when the right frequency activates it anew. And today, this code is awakening through us, through our striving for truth and harmony. Perhaps the reader will be interested to know how a place that has vanished into oblivion can reassert itself. However, the return of Atlantis should not be understood literally. It refers to a transformation at a vibrational level. It's important to understand that what is implied is not the physical resurgence of land from the ocean depths, but the awakening of consciousness within the depths of the human soul. The Atlantean frequency is less a geographical map or a route to follow, and more a state of consciousness to be embodied. Now, more than ever, humanity is presented with a unique opportunity to make this choice. This process doesn't occur through grand events, but in the quiet moments of daily life, in the decisions made, and in internal changes. It manifests in how each person relates to themselves and to others. This is how the ascent of a new Atlantis begins, not in discovered archaeological finds, but in a rekindled consciousness. The modern world persistently urges us to seek answers externally, to measure success solely by speed of progress, volume of production, and flawless execution. However, the Atlantean path offers a completely different approach. It is characterized by greater depth and unhurriedness. It calls us to turn inward, listen to our feelings, question inherited beliefs, detach from intrusive noise, and return to inner knowledge. It's worth acknowledging that this is not an easy task, as everything around us, complex systems, gadget screens, and rigid schedules, deliberately distracts from this path. However, distraction is not a predetermination, it's more of a test. And the moment one begins to make a conscious choice for a different path, listening to the quiet voice of their intuition instead of intrusive external stimuli, their alignment with the Atlantean frequency occurs. And they are not alone in this endeavor. This is the captivating power of memories. They have the ability to spread like ripples on water. A person awakened to truth becomes a kind of mirror, reflecting possibilities for others. There's no need for instructions or teachings. Simply living life in accordance with true values gives those around an unspoken permission to do the same. The new Atlantis is being built not from soulless stone, but from conscious presence, sincere intention, and unwavering integrity. Communities emerge not for convenience, but around a commonality of consciousness. People unite not based on similar opinions, but through shared energy. This is the Atlantean legacy in action. The return is happening subtly, without grand declarations. Rather, it's a quiet, persistent hum, felt as a growing desire for a more authentic life, to slow down, to engage in deep communication, and to critically assess everything that seems artificial. It's an attraction, an awakening of memories, a transition from a world based on control to a world where inner coherence reigns. In this grand narrative, everyone plays an important role. Every person is a living transmitter of a unique frequency. Each time a choice is made for love over fear, curiosity over judgment, intuition over dogma, this new reality is strengthened.